Good evening. On behalf of the Friends of the Logan Square Library, we want to invite you to this event. The Friends group started, I don't know, 5 or 6 years ago, and our mission is to promote the library with events. We've had music events, crafts, book author talks. Our last program in June was the father and son talking about the book Boarded Up Chicago that they put together, which was pretty interesting. Um, if you're interested in finding out more about us, just drop your email into the chat and we'll make sure you're included. We're open to new faces, new people. Um, Tonight we're excited to present Marty McConnell. She's a poet, performance artist. We found out about Marty totally by accident. One of the people in our group found a flyer in the neighborhood. I think it was in one of those little free libraries. Um, so we tracked her down and invited her to um, do a performance for us. We try to feature local people, so literature and local. It seemed like a good fit. And so we invited Marty, and she graciously offered to come and do a performance. Um, she's a poet, a writer, a performance artist. She's written a number of books, including Gathering Voices, creating a community-based poetry workshop, Wine for a Shotgun. When they say you can't go home again, what they mean is you were never there, sounds very intriguing. Um, Her work has been published in a whole bunch of magazines and anthologies, more than I can even name. Um, so we're really excited. I'm looking forward to this. Um, she is going to entertain us with her poetry for about 20, 30 minutes or so, and then we'll have time at the end if people have questions or comments. So Marty, you're on.
Awesome. Hi. Yeah, so I love the super locality slash global nature of this reading. Since Logan Square is my neighborhood library. And actually what happened is that my landlord, who is a retired journalist and novelist, he put up a little free library in front of our building and put up posters on either side of it, permanently affixed, with information about himself and about me, saying with our pictures, saying like this is, and he doesn't even live here. He just thought it was appropriate that writers lived here, and he thought people should know. So it's good to be stalkable in person as well as on the internet. Yay. So anyway, this is definitely the most fun thing that's ever come out of that, aside from one time when somebody was like walking past it and then sort of like looked at the picture and looked at me, and I was like, yeah, I didn't put it there. It's weird. So great. So I'm gonna read a couple poems out of the most recent book, When They Say You Can't Go Home Again. What they mean is you were never there. And then I'm going to read an essay out of the book of lyric essays that I'm working on. So it's like, what is the lyric essay, right? Like, what is genre? Everything is everything at this point. So it's poemish and memoirish and all that. And then I'll close with a couple of poems from the book. I was saying earlier on, right at the beginning, that I had intentions of reading a lot of the poems in this book interrogate whiteness, interrogate this moment in terms of our country's like reckoning with its history, particularly pertaining to race and pertaining to gender and rape culture and all those sorts of things. And I literally just don't have it in me right now because I ran a racial healing circle this afternoon. So you're gonna get kinder, gentler poems over this next little bit. And that's how it's gonna go. You're welcome. So this is the first poem in the book. The title is Come Now, Let's Sit in What Light Is Left. Out here, I can believe this world isn't going to end, or not yet, or not here, that the painter in the garden harvesting the last spring kale, the giant white dog gentling against the blue house, the clamor of chickens, and this sweetly creaking tree swing will go on and on. So even as riots and ocean consume all the lilacs but these, some bright, impenetrable sphere will form around this now of the blooming hostas and wind ruffling the pine branches, the high up dialogue of starlings as evening's April chill strolls in. I know this world is going to end. I feel it in the concrete and guttering light. But there is a yellow chair here facing the trees, and I will sit in it and ask you to come closer, to bring yard violets and sweet grass to burn, and ask you once again to forget. I realize there's no poems in the book that don't just like have a background of darkness. So here you go. This is where we are. Love in the late Holocene. Since the beginning of time, it's gotten hotter and hotter. And now, just when I'm beginning to get comfortable, it's all starting to stop. Boys with flashlights and folded tents approaching. You say the beginning of time and mean a theory about planets. I mean something about humans being molecules mashed together whether they like it or not. Some watches must be worn to stay wound. Our kitchen clock is 1 hour and every day a few more seconds behind, thanks to daylight savings, batteries invented to go obsolete, and our laziness or unwillingness to pull over a chair. Once, in the middle of a storm, tornado sirens blaring, some men the next campsite over tried to help us take down our canopy and tent. Cell phones for flashlights and your headlamp through the rain. In the morning, a twisted giraffe of metal testified to our shared failure. It's not that I want to be alone, more that this human suit is so molecularly dense and prone to sadness. Lights moving through a ripe field, some cold, encroaching fog. It's been so long since I've read through these poems that I'm realizing like all this weird background stuff. Like I appear to be obsessed with weather, and which of course when we think about climate change, right? Like we think about weather, and a lot of the book is also about that late Holocene, living in the Anthropocene kind of moment that we're in, and what that means for us as humans, and trying to be alive and connected and stay in these bodies. So this is queerer weather. Language itself inverts, subjugates, and this means we don't have to go home alone anymore. This is a chair that folds out into a palm tree, and I can't stand Los Angeles. Language is the locus of all tyranny. Also, love offered like water, the mouth giving and giving before coming to silence, before saying, I could gift you all the noise in this body, and still the door wouldn't close. This chair doesn't turn into anything, and it's my favorite. It's a chair. You were born in California, and that's okay. I love you, it's true, and people shout about it on the television with some frequency. They think we and our kind will usher in a new era which could be called the tyranny of choice. And then their grandchildren will marry dogs or potted plants, and there goes the family tree, so to speak. The language of fear is magnetic and simple, easily digested and attracted to itself. We see it every day. This is Chicago. The water makes the weather. So I'm gonna read this this essay poem mashup hybrid thing. It's called Damages. And you are all part of my grand experiment. I've never read it out loud. It's gonna be very exciting. I've read sections of it out loud, yes? It's gonna be great. All right. There's all of the above, and then there's nothing. The pain in my right shoulder, Glasses stacked in boxes made to case wine, the impossibility of cleaning the outside of the uppermost of these old windows. 12 years ago, I learned that bread poisons me, but that was after the doctor took my gallbladder and left me 3 small scars, a constellation I once told someone was a trio of buckshot marks, and she believed me. That was before the turquoise pills that made me sicker, after the ulcer meds and months of saltines, which was all before a lover who was a nutritionist and a jazz singer gave me evening primrose oil and probiotics, and I moved to New York City. I need to drink more water and strengthen my rhomboid muscles so I can side plank on my right side again. I know what to do, and I do a little of it. In last night's dream, I became a beast, or I was a beast. I was a beast of immolation. My hands burned and burned anything I tried to touch. It's almost time to unpack the glasses, open the windows, and let the season in. At the liquor store, a man came close to me and said, "Pick your poison." He didn't even work there. He had tequila in his basket, but this was in the wine aisle. What I didn't say was, "The day invites you to mastery, but you are riveted by mustard." What I didn't say was, "Continents shift, and you are busy at the gym." What I said was, right, as I chose a rosé and closed my coat. At the surgeon's office when I was 22 and possibly going to have my gallbladder removed, the surgeon said, "Are you sure you want to do this?" And I said, "What will happen if I don't?" And he said, "You'll just keep getting worse." And I said, "Okay, then, I guess we should do it." And he said, "Okay, just don't get fat afterward." I asked him why he would say that about getting fat, and he said people often gain weight after gallbladder removal because they can eat greasy, fatty food again. I said I didn't think it would be a problem. This seemed to satisfy him. The water in this bar is awful, and the television raves and raves. Is the desert a complaint against rain? I want to feel something soft. A man waves from a golf cart. The ice melts in my drink. A country blows up. My hands don't fit around anything anymore. Water glass, neck, apparition. Today, I told the story of my childhood stalker to a stranger at the behest of a lecturer on empathy. Yes, I'll have another. Could you turn the sound down? I don't know anyone who died today. I put my hands around a bottle and it dropped. I looked up the firing range of submachine guns and North Korea's mid-range nuclear missiles. These men with their little lies and guns and golf carts to haul them around in. I want my big life to start, but also this citrus and gin. I lied to the guy at the bar, too interested in my ring and notebook, but not to that girl about the stalker. I wonder what happened to him in the end. It went jail, institution, I don't know. Sometimes when I think about all the small things I've survived, it adds up to a kind of mythology. Years ago, my love and I wandered so long in an apple orchard corn labyrinth that eventually we walked out the side, just parted the stalks and walked out. The kids with their pumpkin faces gaping. Sometimes lying to strangers is a kind of armor. There's lightning even in the desert. It's called a dry storm. What I want evaporates before it hits the ground, but makes some powerful light along the way. How to start out of silence, the way the mouth makes first a space, then a sound, a cry, a shout out of nothing. I would like to make a space where any sound can live, but my every whisper is a muzzle to someone. Still, silence. The silence is a terrible betrayal too. Brutal choices in a brutal time. Maybe your grandmothers are racist as well. Then this is for you. Mine are dead, but were the sort who loved Walter Payton and were kind to my dreadlocked Brooklyn friends, but avoided the movie theaters full of them and the mall stores full of them. And I'm not trying to preach or prescribe anything here, just to beg us into the human for a minute or two. The way light begs us into radiance after weeks of rain, I don't know anything. I don't know anything about pain. There's a song I used to love that says, do you know what it's like to be hunted? Do you know what it's like to be hunted? I'm begging us to be real, real human as we head into the month full of witches with fake noses and toilet paper mummies, as if witches aren't women and Egypt isn't full of mummified remains of actual humans. How quickly we, the comfortable cartoon history and anything that overflies our common understanding. How we want to remember our grandmothers only as the women who pretended not to know the crossword answers so that we could fill them in first, who called us sugar and unwrapped our candy in the movie theater so quietly no one could hear, hoping no one sees us inventing our fears out of soundtrack and the dark, glistening corners of our mouths. What does it mean to be a beast rather than a creature or a human? If I say of an athlete in an admiring tone, she's a beast, it's clear, I think, that I mean she has tapped a power that invokes a sense of envy in me and likely in all who witness her prowess. But then there's the trouble of historical animalification, which is to say dehumanization of bodies belonging to people of color, of women and others enslaved, subjugated, etc. Can we reclaim the beast, become beasts of our own making, recreate ourselves again and again so utterly or so subtly that we become simultaneously creature and creator? What do I mean when we say we? How do we bind ourselves to each other? And how are we bound irrevocably without choosing? I've been hunted. I imagine you have been too. I can understand some edges of the lives of the people I love who are hunted in ways I am not, partly because I have been hunted and partly because I love them. I understand too that there are gaps in that understanding that nothing can bridge. And I work to fill that gap with love, as corny as that may sound, so that what flows into the space between us from my side is as pure an offering as I can make. A few months ago, my friend's wife entered the women's restroom in a restaurant where they were eating dinner in Chicago, in a neighborhood with a large queer population, nearly 2 decades into the 21st century. The bartender left his spot behind the bar to bang his fist on the bathroom door loudly and call for Marjorie to exit. Marjorie has very short hair. Marjorie wears clothes that come mostly from the side of the store marked for men. Marjorie is a woman. Marjorie stayed inside the bathroom and her wife approached to ask what the issue was. The bartender shouted, "There's a man in there." And her wife said, "No, that's my wife." My friend went into the bathroom and brought her shaken wife out. The bartender was still angry, did not apologize, shouted about how was he to know that he was watching out for people's safety. My wife has very short hair. My wife wears clothes that come mostly from the side of the store marked for men. My wife is a woman. I have long hair. I wear clothes that mostly come from the side of the store marked for women. I don't worry when I go to the bathroom that the other occupants will startle and yell, "Sir, this is the ladies' room." I don't worry that someone will go tell the bartender or the bouncer that there's a man in there. I don't worry about what the bartender or bouncer will do before or after they realize their error. Years ago, I was partnered with a Black man. One night, he was driving a friend's car to our apartment, and just as he turned off the highway, he was pulled over by 2 cops. My partner had no license. The car was not in his name. As I ran the 6 blocks to the highway, white fist tightening around my license, I could see the blue and red police lights splashing against the concrete overpass. And each step pounded out prayer after prayer. Was a beloved body unbroken around the corner, guns still holstered, luck intact, and it was. It was. The one cop said, "Just in time," and the other pointed to a tow truck pulling up, as if that were the worst thing that could have happened. A man stalked me for years before I turned 20. I've been cornered and held down, been followed down streets bright and dark, not taken my love's hand in public for fear of who's watching. I know what it's like to be hunted, and I know there are those I love for whom nowhere is without danger. I know it doesn't have to be this way. Somewhere in a Cincinnati landfill are the small ashes left after the parts of my gallbladder that were broken apart by a laser and sucked out through an incision just under my navel were incinerated as medical waste. Removing my gallbladder did not improve anything about my body. My hands do not in waking fact burst into flame, though often in dreams and frequently in meditations. I have 13 tattoos on my body. The most recent and visible graces my forearm in the shape of a compass-like star, adapted from the star card of the traditional tarot deck. I got it after my uncle died, and I remembered again that there is no time to waste being anything but the brightest beast possible. I don't know why you get tattoos, but for me, it's always healing. To break the skin, the body's largest organ, and be in this small way reborn. Tiamat Eva Medusa is a dragon who was assigned male and human at birth. Her body is covered with inked scales patterned after the Western diamondback rattlesnake. Her ears, her eyes, her teeth, and her tongue have all been modified into dragon alignment. I would say, admiringly, she's a beast. She might have done more to the man with the tequila than nod and walk away. Then again, she knows what it is to walk this world as a man and as a dragon, and I've only ever been this girl. The day before my friend Gabrielle died, she was wearing her fuck cancer knit cap, sitting up in her hospice bed, working. The day she died, I was driving around to vintage stores with my friend Phil, waiting to be told when we could come by to see her again. When we got the call to come now, right now, I was holding a cowboy shirt and looking at a mannequin that was mostly torso. We were allowed to go in and say goodbye one more time, one at a time. So I held my friend Whammo's baby while he went in. To keep her quiet, I went into the small chapel where the light made bright patterns through the stained glass. Gabrielle's dad assumed I was Whammo's wife, the baby's mother, and it didn't seem important to correct him. When I went into Gabby's room, she was gone as a person can be and still be breathing. A body has never looked to me so much like a pocket or an empty balloon. The air was so thin and present, it hung over us like gauze while we waited. My tattoo for her and for Blair and Melissa and Kent and Heather says, "I am living. I remember you." It's the last line of Marie Howe's poem, "What the Living Do." What I remember most clearly about each of these people is how they laughed. I can hear it, but I can't describe it. When I say to you, someday you and I are going to die, what does that remind you of? I can't place the phrase, and the internet is of no help. Is it a song lyric, a book title, something someone once said to me in a dream? It feels as familiar as my sternum, where I flatten my hand to calm me down. Novelist P.O. Enquist wrote, "One day we shall die, but all the other days we shall be alive." Someone, possibly Charles Schulz himself, but I suspect an internet meme philosopher, as I can't find the original source and the font is wrong, adapted this into a Snoopy comic. Looking out from a short pier onto a blue lake, Charlie Brown says, "Someday we will all die, Snoopy." And Snoopy says, "True, but on all the other days, we will not." In Ram Dass's brilliant documentary, Going Home, he talks about how his stroke, which had him almost fully immobilized for a long time, and from which he will never recover, was a blessing in that it took him inward more fully than ever, even after a long life built on introspection. He says, "I don't wish you the stroke, but I wish you the grace from the stroke." Lines toward the end of Kate Knapp Johnson's poem Envoy Prayer read, "Two girls sail their bright-tailed kite over the schoolyard while the lilacs snow down. Honey peach and honey pear, each gift ravishes and restores in us what will also be broken again and again without reconciliation. Without reconciliation. With ravishment, each gift, every rejoicing, every failure, every poison chosen or evaded makes us the creatures we are, here, breathing and breaking and breathing, bestial." She prays, "Lord, do not save us from this world. Save us in it. Save us in it." I choose all of the above. Someday you and I are going to die, but here we are, largely intact, frequently healing, most of our organs assorted as they should be, holding and filtering and excreting and receiving light so another organ, the big squishy gray one, can look. Look at that. Isn't that the most exquisite film of dust ever to coat an apartment window? Isn't it glorious? And the heart organ is not grateful. The heart organ pumps blood, but the heart is grateful. It is. All of the above. Ooh. Ooh, it's like really different to read long form stuff in terms of breathing and everything else. So I'm going to read one last poem. It's the last poem in the book. It's the title poem of the book. I'm going to have a little wine. Karen, I couldn't look at you when I was talking about Gabby. I forgot that part was in there. It was like Karen G, who's here on is another mutual friend of ours. So it's like, oh, yeah. When they say you can't go home again, what they mean is you were never there. Maybe it's time to celebrate the hideous, not to confess with some hope for absolution, but to gather all the terrible selves and minutes and show them the trees and the way the rain has just abated so the air has ocean in it. Part of me died here, so another could go on, walking the path on the hill where I became larger than myself and the day could no longer contain me. Turns out, dust can also recompose itself, a starfish arm or lizard tail. What I cut off kept walking without me, remembering the fireflies on the broad lawn and plastic cups in dormitory basements, the tea house, and everything I shamelessly left in pursuit of the shining next. I'm saying I've learned to breathe as if I were always singing. I wish I could say everything I've done and still be loved. I feel this enormous debt to the world for letting me exist and do all the damage my living requires. I'm hungry and the tea is cold. The hill is a hill no matter who I am. It will take a long time to say the everything, and already some are turning away. It's hard work witnessing at a birth, blood everywhere, and the awful quiet between the screaming. You can bring your everything too. We're making the dirt arable again. We're burying our shit like animals do. And tomorrow there will be a garden ringed with lemon trees, though by then we'll be on our way gone. For luck, afterbirth under the single poplar. All the stopping and starting, interruptions of prayer. Language as vehicle and impediment. All the lives before this one, practice. Is that a castle in your elbow? My clavicles made of mud. I'm trying to tell you about my fear. A door opening in another room. The way light changes after rain. The air around a body after sweat. I'm not finished yet. Somebody kiss me now, right on the garden. Everything's coming up green. Whew. Made it through before the cough. Thank you all so much for indulging and listening and being here.
Thank you. I have a couple of questions.
Yeah.
So one of the people that is participating is involved in your reading and writing group. Do you want to promote it?
Sure. Yeah. So at the beginning of the pandemic, I had this. So to back up a little bit, for many years, for about 10 years, I was running a a writing workshop once or twice a month here in my living room in Chicago, and had taken a bit of a break from that. And then when the pandemic hit, uh, you know, we're all like, what? How do we stay human? You know, and like, there were a couple of readings that I was able to be part of that really like let us connect to folks all over the country. Like the Bowery Poetry Club in New York did a huge one, did like several like marathon readings, and I was like, that was amazing to like see all these people, and you know, wow, people like willing to be on Zoom at this point. Remember when that was a new thing? And so anyway, I was like, well, you know, what do I want to do? I want to like read poems with people and like do some writing. So I just sort of put it out there, and I was like, what if we did this? And then people started showing up. And so it was doing, for a while, it was like every week, and that was every other week. And now it's like every other week or every like 3 weeks or so, because the world is opening up and there's lots of stuff to do. But they are, Patrick and Karen both come to those with some regularity. And they're just awesome. They're generative writing workshops. They're totally pay what you can, like $1 or nothing, or you know, $1 million. No one's ever paid $1 million. That'd be really exciting. But I think Eventbrite would shut me down. Anyway, we spend like half the time looking at a poem together and talking about it, and then we spend the last half doing some guided writing, where I ask a lot of like weird, funky, wild questions to get people to write weird, wild, funky poems. And yeah, so I'll put in the chat box this is my email address, which is the easiest way to get on the mailing list. But you can also go to my website and get the and get the information about it there.
So, yeah. One more question. I'm really intrigued about the racial healing workshops that you do. I mean, how do you? That's got to be tough.
The racial healing workshops.
Yeah.
Yeah, so they're through an organization here in Chicago called TRHT, Truth, Racial Healing and Transformation, which is now housed under the Chicago Community Trust, which is great because it gives us a really big platform. But so there's a community of I don't know, 100 or so of us who are trained as facilitators, and it's really, um, I feel really connected to it because it's very much a storytelling model. So we do, there's a lot to be done out there that's in terms of like like direct action, right? Like protests and mutual aid and reading books and talking about them and all of that. But a lot of time what gets left out is like the heart work, like the actual, especially for white people who tend to be sort of like cut off at the neck in terms of like any sort of ways of moving through the world. And so what I do is I co-facilitate groups. I've co-facilitated some mixed race groups, but largely what I do is work with groups of white people on talking about our experiences with race, with racism, how we've grown in our understanding of it, how we haven't grown in our understanding of it. And those are co-facilitated with a person of color, who are some of the most generous people of color ever, right? Like they're willing to sit in a room with like being the only person of color there and having it be a group of white people, and we make space for people to say the wrong thing and cry and fuck up, sorry, and like do all the stuff that we're terrified to do and we shouldn't like put people of color through. So yeah, they're really super powerful. We haven't done any in a while, but usually like once say once a season or so, we've been doing an open call so people can put together a group of people to do the circles, or they can just sign up and then you're with a group of strangers, which is also really powerful. But a lot of what we're doing right now is working in organizations. So working, within a nonprofit or within a company to have these conversations in a facilitated space. So it's pretty amazing. But a lot of it is it's working, just telling stories. It's like when's a time when you were othered, and then developing empathy through those sorts of things. Or when did you become aware of like race as a construct, and of privilege and what comes with that. So it's great. TRHT, Chicago Community Trust.
Well, people should ask questions or make.
I can't hear you, Libby. Libby, I can't hear you.
Yeah, Libby, you're a little robot-y. But I think we're just opening the floor.
Is that better?
Oh yeah.
I'm sorry. I keep screwing up and not. It's a long story. Never mind.
Technology.
Anyway, ask questions, people. The floor is open.
Well, I have a question. Your poems just go from one to another idea and then they come back. And I was wondering, do you write them all in a flow or do they come to you in chunks, or how do you write these poems?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. My brain, it's just how my brain works too. Like ask any of my friends, like that's how conversations go. Like my conversations with friends tend to be very elliptical. Like we'll start on a topic and then there's somewhere else, then we're over here. And then we're like, right, we were talking about bacon, and then it was factory farming and it was the end of the world. And then it was your uncle who lived on a farm. And then we're like, right, but bacon is awesome,
Yeah.
So that tends to be like how my poems work. There are occasionally poems that like manage to stay on topic, like take just like I can do the single subject poem once in a while, but yeah, they tend to sort of happen that way. And sometimes purposefully, like sometimes I'll write something and I'm like, okay, and what does that make me think of? It's also had a lot of therapy, and so that's cognitive behavioral therapy. Oh, what does that remind you of? What does that remind you of? And so sometimes I'm doing it purposefully, and sometimes it's just like that's how it works. It just like my brain just sort of pinballs. Or I'll get stuck and I look out the window and I was like, birds. I was writing about birds now,
But you have such a gorgeous vocabulary. Does that just all flow at once, or do you go back and say, I could say that better, or
Yeah. Sometimes things come, but I'm also, as some people in this room will attest, obsessed with revision. I think revision, like the revision process, I actually run, oh, I'll put this in the chat box too. I actually run an online magazine that's all about revision. So we ask poets to give us a poem in its first form or an early form and then its final form, and then do a little micro essay about the revision process. You know, some poems come out and they're like, that's basically it. You know, others torture me for, you know, months or years. And then I'll be like, oh, it's backwards. It needed to be the other way, you know, or like, it's because it's in the wrong tense or the language is wrong. But I'll say that like, you know, the more I am reading other people, the more likely it is that stuff's going to come out closer to where it needs to be. And when I'm like super rusty, you know, I'm like, yeah, when I haven't been reading, and then the well is sort of dry, you know. If you want a poet who has a vocabulary that will put mine to shame, go ahead and read Ross Gay. Oh my God. Yes. GS had asked a question about who's my current favorite poet. Ooh, I mean, the favorite poet question, I like you said current favorite, because yes, it is a transitory category. I will say that I just read this book that embarrassingly came out like 2 years ago, but it's by, I'm putting in the chat box, Victoria Chang. It's called Obit. And it is like, it's been a while since I picked up a book of poetry and was like, I both can't put this down and want to throw it across the room, because it's so good and like, it's so good I want to throw it across the room, but it's so devastating that I also want to like put it under my pillow and just cry on it. So it's this book of mostly prose poems that are focused on her mother's death and her father's stroke that rendered him without language. And it's this whole, so it's these little like sort of obituary style, but they're not obituaries, right? But it's like that's the form of it. But like some of them are music died this day or memory died this day. And some of it's my father's frontal lobe died on this date. Some of it is like Victoria Chang died on this date. So it's also about the little deaths and the transitions. So yeah, so Victoria Chang, Obit for sure. Ross Gay, any moment of any day in our lives. He has a new book out too that I haven't gotten yet. But I mean, I could go on forever, but those two I'll stick with.
I definitely have one. In writing huge, like, I guess lyric essays, is that the proper
We're going
term?
with that. Going with that label, yeah.
And it sounded like it did sound like a lot of your poems, but all put in together, but like in a one big thing. So I don't know what how I guess it's just I had it in my mind essentially going, how do you do that? But
It's a fair question.
yeah, I guess that's a lot.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting the way so this book that is trying to seek out a home, it's called Beasts of Our Own Making, which is touched on in that piece that I read. You know, the essays for it come about in a whole bunch of different ways. Some of it is you know, my just kind of getting obsessed with like an idea or a concept. There are definitely sections of each of the essays, including that one that started out their little lives definitely as poems. After I finished When They Say You Can't Go Home Again, I mean, I didn't write for months and months, and then I was like, why am I cranky all the time? Oh, it's because I'm not writing. And so I was like, I should go ahead and try to do some writing. And I was writing these poems and they felt really unsuccessful. Like they just felt like they weren't doing it, you know, or doing anything. And so I set them aside and I started working on like this idea of doing essays. And then when I would run dry on material, I was like, well, let's look at some of those poems. And I was like, oh, sweet little poems. You're not poems. Like, you are little micro essays that when I take the line breaks out, like, you're doing a ton of work and like you actually function in this way, you know? And so like they were able to go into this, but that it was sort of like they needed the context of the essay. And then, you know, it's a mix and match game. You know, it's been lots and lots of, you know, year and a half of just like moving things around and like writing in different parts. And, but it feels like a real extension of that thing that Ria and I were talking about with the pinballing, right? You know, where it's like an idea and another idea, and then it comes back and then the thing, you know, I have one of these essays where I like, there's this line in a Barbara Rass poem where she talks about, there's a line about like taking this like leap of faith as like doing the high jump, like throwing yourself over the bar backwards, which I've always really loved that image. And so then I end up writing this whole essay that's talking about the high jump. And I did all this like research, which is super fun, about like the high jump and like how like that move where you throw yourself backwards is called the Fosbury flop. And like this guy who was like really bad at high jump invented it because he was no good at doing it the regular way, but that was only possible because they had invented like the sand pit, so it was like a softer landing, because before that you could only go forwards because it was concrete and you would die. And so like all this stuff like came together and everybody was like, you're terrible, you'll never be any good at this. And he was like, no, I'm Dick Fosbury, and he like invented this whole thing, which is amazing, right? And so I'm like able to like do this whole thing that's like, are you setting the bar high enough for yourself? Like, can you keep going? I'm going to stop talking, but yeah.
That's
I don't know if that's the answer to your
no,
question.
that helps.
How do you do it? You let your brain go nuts. That's how you do it.
I did that a long time ago. On the page, like what you read, that would look like a paragraph, essentially.
Yeah, it looks like this. Like it's like a real live essay. Yeah, it's like all, yeah. No line breaks, which is also why I was like losing my breath, because I don't know how to read that stuff. 2 decades of reading poems out loud. You can't read prose.
We have more questions for Marty?
She's almost done with her wine, so you gotta get in here.
Are we okay? I guess we're done. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks for being here.
Thank you. Thank you for hosting.
Yeah, it was great. We've recorded it, so we'll put it up on our Facebook page.
Awesome.
Cool.
Great.
Thanks again, everybody.
Bye.
Have a good
Thank you all. Have a good night.
Yes, have a good night, everybody.
Yes.